Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hotspot, a show that brings you the hottest news as it is happening. I am your host, Oratile Dolamo. In today's hot topic, we will be discussing gender inequality. And to help me tackle that today, we have in studio Mr. Helenard Lowe from the African Gender Institute. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Earlier on this year, the UN published a demographic report for 2019 showing that there are more women than men. Is this why men enjoy more privileges than women?
Oratila, I don't think that men enjoy more privileges than women. I think that men have more privileges than women. There's a social system and structure in place in society called patriarchy. And this is a system that deals with power, right? Dynamics of power. And this system tells us that men have more inherited power than women do, right? So as a result, men thus have more privileges, more opportunities, and more power over women. However, there are also particular movements that are going against the structure of patriarchy. For example, there is a movement called the hashtag patriarchy must fall, right? It's a very radical kind of response to this inherited system of power. Yes, but to answer your question, I think that men do have a great amount of power and privileges over women and in comparison to women, yeah.
All right. What is the difference between gender inequality and feminism?
I often find that in my experiences of lecturing gender studies at the University of Cape Town, that students find it difficult to understand the differences between gender inequality or gender equality and feminism. And I completely understand that. I get that because they are overlapping, but and in many ways they're also intertwined.
Yeah.
Gender equality is the idea or the notion that men and women should be afforded equal opportunity, regardless of their cultural backgrounds, regardless of their degrees or where they acquire their particular degrees. However, feminism, on the other hand, is a movement that advocates for gender equality. But feminism is a bit more than that as well. Feminism is also very personal. Feminism is the kind of movement that addresses particular experiences, lived experiences of women and by women, right? So the movement emerged from the idea that that women are being discriminated against on the basis of their sex, right? That women are not being afforded as much or equal opportunities than men do, right? So that radical movement emerged out of that anger, right? Out of that frustration and devastation, right? Out of that suffocation of violence, right? So to me, I think that feminism is also very personal because it addresses particular issues that women experience, particular challenges that women face. And for that reason, we also have different streams of feminism. We've got African feminism, black feminism, we've got the traditional white or Western feminism, we've got Afrofeminism, Negro feminism. So, and the only reason why there is that difference is because each particular stream of feminism addresses something that is very unique to those particular women who identify or who resonate with those kind of meanings of feminism.
And I like the fact that you mentioned that it comes from anger somewhere, like suffocation. Does feminism attack men?
I mean, it could be perceived as such, but and attack in what way though? Maybe the what we need to then unpack is meanings of attack. What does it mean to attack, right? But I think what feminism definitely does is feminism exposes men. It exposes the problem in society, and that is men, right? Feminism, and I often hear this a lot by students and by women that, that because they identify as a feminist, they are perceived as angry women, right? And rightfully so, rightfully so, that the kind of challenges that the structure of power that men put women in is enough to make them angry. Right? So I get that. But I don't necessarily think that feminism attacks men, because I do know a lot of women who are feminists and who are married to men. I know a lot of feminists who gave birth to men, right? So I think that it definitely just highlights or exposes men in a very particular way that may be perceived as an attack. But I don't necessarily feel attacked by feminists as a man. I don't feel attacked. I do feel exposed.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, rightfully so.
All right, thank you. The late Kenyan activist Wangari Maathai said that the higher you go, the fewer women there are. Helenard, we've established that 52% of the world's population are female, and that the most positions of power and prestige are occupied by men. Why?
It is such an unfortunate deficit perception that society have on a woman. It is a traditional perception that has come on for centuries, that that women are incapable, that women are inadequate, that women are not smart enough,
not powerful enough,
not brave enough, not strong enough to be in particular positions. Exactly. So, and it is the same kind of ideology that thus places women at the back, right? It is this for this reason that men are perceived to be more powerful, more adequate, more capable of doing particular kinds of work. And even if and when women do step up in, for example, corporate spaces, there is still a very an underestimated or underestimation idea or perception that these particular men have on these women. So it is unfortunate that trajectory of thinking and of understanding gender still exists in 2019.
In 2019.
Right. Yeah.
Do you think it is the lack of unity among women that women are so behind in powerful positions?
That's an interesting question, and I think it opens up, a great debate, right? I don't want to say that it is a lack of unity, because I do think that there is unity, that women are strong when they stand together, right?
When they stand together.
When they stand together. I think, and we can see that in different feminist spaces and feminist movements. But I also, on the other hand, think that there are women who are complicit to traditional and cultural understandings of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man. And for that reason, they move away from the movement of feminism, right? So they don't necessarily agree with it because they are not accustomed to it, they don't know it, right? They were raised in cultures and traditions where they were told that there is no space for them, that their space is in kitchens, in the house, that their space is in nurturing children, right? And for that reason, there was a lack of role models that women could look up to, right? And it is only now, after years, that women are now beginning
To adapt.
and to challenge those kind of thinkings and those kind of that particular way of being a woman, that particular way of what it means to be a man. Yeah.
Oh, right. Is there a particular reason why women should be paid less for doing the same job as a man? Do you think that is fair?
I definitely think that it is unfair.
Very much so.
That women are still being underpaid, and you know, this is also seen in very large corporate institutions, where, for example, a female accountant, right, will be paid way less than the male accountant, right, regardless of the fact that this particular female accountant has
more experience.
Might be more experienced, might also have acquired the degree from a very elite and renowned institution.
Yeah.
But just based on their sex, that there is still that pay gap between the two sexes. It is a reality that exists, and it is something that we cannot shy away from. It's something that's real, right? And it is so unfair. It's such an injustice. And that is exactly also what feminist movements address and what they expose, right? It is that injustice. It is that kind of discrimination. Yeah.
All right. You're still watching Hotspot. We'll be back right after the break. Welcome back. You are still watching the Hotspot. Now, to join in on our conversation, you can follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at official CME TV. Helenard, what is, in your opinion, why in a patriarchal society men are allowed to have more wives but women are not?
I think the question speaks to customs of culture and tradition, that in particular African cultures, it is okay, it is allowed, men are allowed to have more than one wife, right? But aside from culture and tradition, there's also the religious aspect of it, that in Christianity, for example, it is also, we read of stories where men from the Bible had more than one wife as well, right? So what we can thus see from the relationship that we can see from culture and religion is that there is still this overarching system or structure of power that is patriarchy. We can see that religion is very patriarchal, right? Because religion informs women on how to be a wife, how to be a woman, how to serve your husband, right? Or how to serve a man. And so does culture as well. Culture also tells us that women are subordinate and inferior, and that men are superior, and that men can have more than one wife, that men can control the amount of women that he chooses to have sexual intercourses with or relationships with.
Do you think men in 2019 are only doing it for religious purposes because they've read it somewhere in the Bible? Or they're just taking advantage?
I cannot speak for those particular men or for men in general. What I can comment on is that we do read about reasons why men go into polygamous marriages or relationships, right? And one of which is the sexual advantage, right? Is that it keeps them sexually fit, is that it keeps them healthy, sexually healthy, is that they don't want to get bored of, um, you know, having a sexual relationship with one woman, with their wives, right? And they thus perceive it as something healthy for their own sexual relationships or their own marriages, right? What we also read on, which is very interesting, is the reasons why women agree to polygamous marriages, right?
Yeah.
Number one, we know or we read of
Security.
financial
security.
right? We read of women who don't necessarily want to be independent and to work for themselves,
Yeah.
but they want to live off the riches or the wealth of their husbands.
But then
right?
what about the wives that are forced into polygamous marriages? What about those?
And that is also reality, that there are still women being forced in marriages, right? And again, that also speaks to the structure. What is it that makes women feel obliged or obligated to agree to arranged marriages, right? And you know what we also see is that just how violent patriarchy is, that it shuts women down, it silences them, so much so that even in arranged marriage, they have no say in whether they can or want to be with that particular man.
Okay, can you comment on why in most African cultures the male child is more likely to inherit the father's wealth and the daughter is not?
Again, I don't think that I can speak to that or on that.
You just put in your comment.
I am not. I don't. I'm not from an African culture, right? My culture is colored. I'm from a colored community.
Isn't colored a mixture of black and white?
Colored is many things. It can be a mixture of black and white, but it is also so much more than that too. But in the colored culture, for example, age is very important. So when we think of what wealth or what assets go down to children, we think of it as in terms of age. So the youngest child will get the most privileges or will inherit all the assets.
Regardless of gender.
Regardless of gender, right? In African cultures, in African communities, that might be slightly different, that it's not so much based on age, but based on gender, right? And it is also, again, at least for me, I think that it is quite unfortunate that men are still given so much privileges, right? So now we get to understand that patriarchy and privilege and power is intergenerational, right? And it is one of those generational curses that we need to break. Yeah.
Okay, so Helena, we've been talking about patriarchy and power and how that places men on a higher pedestal than women. Do you think a woman's success is a threat to a man?
Oratil, I definitely think so. Because what happens when women step up in corporate spaces is that power is being threatened, right? So there's a shaking that happens, not only in the organization, the patriarchal organization, but also in men who sit in positions of power, right? That suddenly there is a change, there's a radical transformation happening, right? And I get to see this a lot in today's corporate spaces, because they are more inviting of black women, for example, right? So young black women are emerging and flourishing in corporate spaces, in institutions, right? And they are challenging inherited power of, for example, white old men, right? So for years, these particular men have been accustomed to their privileges and their power. They have been sitting so comfortably in those warm seats of decision making.
Knowing that women can't speak up.
Knowing that women cannot speak up. And suddenly, a young black woman walks in, disrupts that space, brings in innovative ideas, creative ways of thinking or doing work.
And that
right?
nurture that brings a team together that men
Exactly.
lack most of the time.
Exactly. So this woman comes in and brings in something completely different to what this culture, this organizational culture is accustomed to, right? This woman also brings in power, because we know that education empowers us, and it empowers women to be able to speak up in a boardroom among white old men, to be able to introduce new ideas, different ways of doing things. So definitely that there is a shift in power, and there's strong tensions between that, right? Because it's not only just tensions of sex or gender. It is also tensions of race. So it's racial tensions. It's also tensions of age, right? There's a significant age gap. So it's also that kind of tensions, and of class as well, right? That suddenly a black woman from an underprivileged background is now competing or stepping into a market of an upper class.
A market they never thought a black woman would get to.
Exactly. So power becomes very fragile. Men become very fragile, right? Their masculinities are fragile, and that is exactly why men will feel intimidated by women.
So you're saying men are aware of these gender inequalities?
Definitely, men are aware of gender inequalities.
And what are they doing to change that?
Some men are joining the movements. Some men are joining
what movement? The
feminist
feminism
movement, right? So some men are allies in the movement. Some men are advocating for the rights of women. Some men are actually stepping down from their positions and handing it over to
a woman.
To women, right? But of course, the majority of men are still very stubborn and still aware of social issues and injustices happening around them, but are very arrogant and ignorant to it, right? And it is because they know that they have this power.
So it's more so about their egos.
It's about egos. It's about their own masculinities. It's just also their toxic way of being and of thinking.
What do you think as a society we can do to humble these men and make them understand that women are here and they are here to take power?
That's a good question that you're asking. And I think what society needs to do is that we need to advocate for patriarchy must fall. That's what actually needs to happen. Patriarchy must fall.
Must fall.
Yeah.
Hashtag patriarchy must fall. Preference of a son over a daughter has been reviewed as a major cause of female infanticides around the world. Are sons more important than daughters?
It is the perception that sons are more important than daughters, because sons come with physical strength, with power, with intelligence. Sons come with ways of doing, right? So
Don't daughters come with that?
It is perceived. I'm not saying that I agree to this perception. I'm saying that this is a perception, right? That the perception is that men are born to change the world, that men are born to do things, that men are born to participate and make things happen, right? That they are fit enough for that, right? And that women aren't, right? That is the perception that we've been told to believe, right? That, growing up with, for example, with sisters around me, right? I know that there was an immense amount of pressure for me as the only man to be able to step up and to do things, to get things done, right? But my sisters were very relaxed about that.
But why don't you speak on that at home?
I can speak on it now.
Yeah.
Because I understand gender. I understand power and I understand privilege. But at a young age, you don't. You are just told that this is how you need to be, right? That this is how you need to navigate the world moving forward. That if you want to be successful as a man, you need to go out and get it. And that women aren't successful. The woman that you will get married to is the woman who will be cleaning your house, who will be looking after your children, who will be feeding you, who will be serving you, right? So find a woman that is fit enough to serve you, right? But you need to be fit enough to go in the world and to make the money. That is what we were taught while growing up. But and that is also why there is, you know, this preference for men, because it's this idea that men can change the world, which is so, it's bizarre, because now that, you know, there are movements that empower women, we are actually seeing the world being changed and transformed. We are seeing spaces being transformed and spaces feeling a bit more lighter and safer and not as policed and controlled by men. Yeah.
All right, thank you for watching The Hotspot with me, your host, Oratile. See you next time.